The rain came down like grief, wild, endless, and without mercy. On the glassy streets of Chicago, neon lights bled into the puddles like bruised stars, and the city seemed to weep along with the man behind the wheel of a crimson Ferrari. Liam Caldwell, 43. Billionaire and heir to a dynasty that measured love in contracts, gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He had spent a lifetime building an empire of glass and steel, and now a single phone call had shattered it. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. The results are conclusive. You're sterile, irreversible." The words replayed in his mind like a cruel refrain. Infertile. Unchangeable. A sentence that stripped him of everything his father had drilled into him. A Caldwell must leave behind more than money. A legacy. A name. A bloodline. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the engine roaring like a wounded animal. Rain lashed against the windshield, but he didn't care. He wanted the noise to drown out the voice in his head, the voice of his late father, cold and commanding, echoing through the years. A man without heirs is a shadow, Liam. Don't ever forget that. For the first time in his life, Liam wanted to forget everything his father, his empire, his own reflection in the glass towers of downtown Chicago. The city blurred before him, the skyscrapers dissolving into streaks of silver rain. He pressed harder on the gas, chasing oblivion. Then, the screech of tires, the flash of metal, the violent spin of a world losing balance. The Ferrari hit the guardrail, twisted once, twice. Then the world turned upside down. The last thing Liam saw was the explosion of white light as his car collided with the barrier. After that, darkness. A few miles away, another pair of headlights pierced the rain. Lucy Martin, 35, drove her beat-up sedan along the South Side Bridge, her windshield wipers fighting the storm. She had just finished a late shift at Southside High, where she taught literature and ran an after-school writing program for kids no one believed in. Her body was tired, but her spirit was steady, the kind of steadiness born from surviving more than one kind of storm. She had grown up in Englewood, where sirens were lullabies and streetlights flickered like dying candles. Lost her mother to cancer at 12, her father to despair soon after. But she had clawed her way up scholarship college and a promise to the ghost of her mother. "I'll be the teacher you never had." Tonight she only wanted to go home, warm up a bowl of soup, and fall asleep to the hum of the old radiator. But fate had other plans. As she crossed the bridge, a flare of orange light cut through the downpour, and overturned car flames licking its underbelly. Lucy slammed on the brakes, her heart jolting. Without a second thought, she threw open her door and ran into the rain. The air was thick with smoke and gasoline. Her sneakers slipped on the wet asphalt. Her lungs burned and her hands trembled. But she didn't stop. Through the cracked windshield, she saw a man slumped over the steering wheel, his face half hidden by blood and shadow. "Hey, can you hear me?" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the storm. No answer. Only the faint flicker of movement, his chest rising weakly. The car groaned as fire spread along the hood. Lucy gritted her teeth and pulled at the crushed door. It refused to budge. She braced her foot against the frame, the heat biting into her skin, and pulled with everything she had. The door gave way with a metallic shriek. "Come on!" she gasped, looping her arms under his shoulders. He was heavy, too heavy, but adrenaline lent her strength she didn't know she possessed. She dragged him out, her muscles screaming, her heart hammering. A second later, the car erupted in flames behind them, the explosion lighting the rain like 1,000 shattered suns. Lucy fell backward onto the wet pavement, cradling the man's head in her lap. His face was pale beneath the soot-sharp jawline, expensive watch, a man from another world. Blood ran down his temple, mixing with rainwater. "You're okay," she whispered, brushing the wet hair from his forehead. "You're safe now. I've got you." For a moment, his eyes fluttered open, brilliant blue, unfocused but searching. They locked on hers, and something passed between them, something beyond language. Fear, relief, recognition. Two strangers suspended between life and death, connected by instinct alone. Then his eyes closed again, and the distant wail of sirens filled the air. When the paramedics arrived, Lucy stepped back into the shadows, refusing to give her name. She watched them lift him onto a stretcher, his face barely visible beneath the oxygen mask. A firefighter called after her. "Ma'am, we need your information." She shook her head, voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "It doesn't matter. He's alive. That's enough." And with that, she disappeared into the storm. When Liam awoke, the world was white and sterile. Hospital lights burned overhead, their brightness cutting through the haze in his skull. The rhythmic beeping of a monitor echoed in his ears. He tried to move, but pain anchored him to the bed. The crash came back in fragments, rainfire, the scent of smoke, and then her. The woman. He remembered her hands warm despite the cold, her voice calm amid chaos. "You're safe now. I've got you." Who was she? He rasped, his throat raw. A nurse looked up from her chart. "Who, sir?" "The woman. She pulled me out of the car." The nurse frowned. "We didn't get a name. She left before we arrived." Liam closed his eyes, frustration and awe tangling in his chest. People didn't just walk away from him. People wanted something from him, money, power, favor. But she vanished. No reward, no trace. In the quiet of that hospital room, for the first time in decades, Liam Caldwell felt small, human. He turned his gaze to the rain streaking down the window outside. Each drop hit the glass like a memory he couldn't quite catch. Who was she? 3 days later, he left the hospital against doctor's orders. Back in his penthouse overlooking the city, everything looked the same: crystal decanters, curated art, silent walls. But nothing felt the same. He poured himself a glass of scotch, but the taste was hollow. He stared at his reflection in the window, a man with everything and nothing at once. That night, he dreamt of her. Not her face, but the feeling, rain, firelight, her voice steady in the chaos. He woke before dawn, the question still echoing through his mind. What kind of woman runs into fire for a stranger? At sunrise, he called his assistant. "Olivia," he said, his tone calm but unshakable. "Find her." On the other side of the city, Lucy sat by the window of her small apartment, the sound of rain still haunting her. She hadn't told anyone about that night. Not the principal, not her students. Some moments were too sacred to explain. Her hand rested on her stomach where a quiet secret grew, a secret she wasn't ready to share with the world. Her relationship with Marcus had ended months ago, but the consequence remained. She whispered into the quiet, "It's going to be okay. We'll be okay." Outside, the rain began to ease, the first streak of dawn, softening the skyline. Lucy turned off the lamp, unaware that across the city, a man she had saved was already searching for her, driven not by debt, but by a strange, unfamiliar need to feel alive again. That night, the rain returned, gentle this time. Liam stood by the window of his penthouse, the city reflected in his eyes. For the first time, he didn't feel like a king looking down from his glass tower. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something he didn't understand. A memory flickered her voice in the storm, the warmth of her hands. He whispered to the darkness, "If you saved my life, maybe you were meant to change it." And somewhere miles away, Lucy closed her eyes and dreamt of fire and rain, and the face of a man she'd never expected to see again. The city glittered below like 1,000 restless thoughts. From the glass tower of Caldwell Enterprises, Liam watched dawn stretch over Chicago, the skyline a blur of steel and smoke. The world expected him to return to business as usual, to hold meetings, close deals, rebuild his reputation after the crash. But nothing about him felt usual anymore. On his desk lay a single manila folder, her name printed neatly at the top, Lucy Martin. He hadn't asked how Olivia found her, only that she did. Money could open any door. But when he opened that file, what he saw couldn't be priced. A literature teacher at Southside High, founder of a small after-school community center, honors graduate from Northwestern scholarship student, no debts, no criminal record, no scandals, just quiet resilience. Tucked inside the file was a photograph. Lucy standing in front of a wall covered with drawings made by her students. Her smile wasn't posed. It was the kind that belonged to people who had learned to find light in dark rooms. Liam traced the edge of her picture with his thumb. "You saved me," he thought. "And you didn't even stay long enough to take credit." He didn't recognize the man in that hospital bed anymore, the one who'd thought life was measured by legacy and control. The night of the crash had stripped him bare. What lingered now was the image of a woman who'd run into fire without hesitation. For days, he carried the thought of her like an unanswered prayer, until one afternoon, when impulse outweighed caution, he told Olivia, "Set up a meeting. Somewhere she feels comfortable." Mama's kitchen smelled of butter, coffee, and warmth. The kind of place where no one wore suits, where people laughed too loudly and called each other honey. It was also the kind of place Liam Caldwell had never stepped foot in. He arrived first, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored gray suit. Condensation gathered on his glass of water as he checked his watch 5 minutes early. His reflection in the window looked almost human under the soft amber light, stripped of the armor he usually wore. When the bell over the door chimed, he turned and time seemed to slow. Lucy walked in, shaking off her umbrella. Her hair was pulled back, a few loose curls damp from the rain. She wore a simple navy dress, the kind that didn't try to impress anyone. Yet her presence filled the room like sunlight through storm clouds. Their eyes met. Hers widened in faint surprise, then softened into polite caution. "Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, approaching the booth. "You're the man from the accident." He rose too quickly, almost knocking over his water. "Please, just Liam." His voice caught slightly. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to thank you properly." Lucy sat folding her hands in her lap. "There's no need. You were hurt. I just did what anyone would have done." He shook his head. "No. You did what no one else would have dared." Her lips curved into a faint smile, equal parts modest and guarded. "You give me too much credit." They spoke about the crash, about her school, about the students she worried over like her own children. Liam listened. Really listened, for perhaps the first time in years. He was used to negotiations, to people waiting for him to finish so they could agree. But Lucy's voice made him forget every agenda he'd ever held. When the waiter placed a basket of cornbread on the table, she smiled wistfully. "My mom used to make this. Said food connects people better than words ever could." Something in her tone tugged at him. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was," Lucy replied softly. "She passed away when I was 12. But she left me her dream. To build a place where kids like me could feel safe. That's what the community center is for." Liam studied her, the gentle certainty in her voice, the way she carried her past, not as a burden, but as a compass. There was a grace in her that wealth couldn't manufacture. Then, as if deciding something silently within herself, Lucy took a breath. Her gaze steadied on him. There's something I should tell you before you hear it from someone else. He leaned forward, sensing the shift in her tone. I'm pregnant, she said quietly. Twins. For a moment, silence filled the air, thick and fragile. Liam blinked. Not shock exactly, more like recognition of something unbearably human. She continued, voice steady, but vulnerable. The father isn't in the picture. He left before I could even process it. I'm not telling you this for pity, but people tend to look at me differently when they know. Liam exhaled slowly, the words catching somewhere between sorrow and awe. That must be a lot to carry alone. Her smile was small-tired. I've carried worse. He wanted to say something profound, something comforting, but all that came out was truth. It's beautiful, you know. You creating life even when life hasn't been kind to you. Lucy's eyes softened. You don't think it's reckless? I think it's brave. For the first time, she looked at him without the cautious distance she'd kept. You surprise me, Mr. Caldwell. Liam, he corrected gently. And you save people, Miss Martin. That's what surprises me. She laughed quietly, and the sound stirred something deep in him, a sound he didn't realize he'd been starving for. As they left the diner, rain had started again, lighter this time. Streetlights reflected off the slick pavement, painting their shadows side by side. Liam offered to walk her to her car. She hesitated, then nodded. You didn't have to find me, she said, as they stopped beside her old sedan. I didn't have a choice, he replied. You pulled me out of fire. The least I could do was find your name. Lucy smiled faintly, brushing rain from her sleeve. Well, now you know it, but I still don't know you. She paused, hand on the car door, her reflection caught in the window beside his. Sometimes that's better, she whispered. People get disappointed when they learn too much. Before he could respond, she slipped inside, started the engine, and was gone, leaving him standing in the drizzle, wondering why the sound of her departure hurt more than the crash itself. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He paced his penthouse, her words replaying in his mind. Pregnant. Twins. 2 lives, tiny, fragile, and real. A future he'd been told he could never have. For the first time in years, his wealth felt meaningless. All his empire, his father's expectations, his boardroom victories, none of it could compare to the sight of her hands resting protectively over her belly. He opened the balcony doors, letting the city wind rush in. Why her, he wondered. Why now? Maybe fate wasn't punishment. Maybe it was redirection. Across town, Lucy lay awake too. The diner replayed in her mind, the awkward billionaire with kind eyes, the sincerity that slipped through his polished demeanor. She had expected arrogance, maybe pity. What she'd seen instead was loneliness. A man unmoored. She turned off the lamp, the rain whispering against her window. Her hand drifted again to her belly. You met someone strange today, she murmured to her unborn children. A man who looks lost, but maybe not unkind. The twins kicked lightly, as if answering her. Lucy smiled, closing her eyes. Somewhere deep inside, something small and dangerous took root. Hope. In the morning, the world shifted again. News broke Billionaire Caldwell seen at Southside Diner with unknown woman. A blurry photo, Liam in his gray suit, Lucy sitting opposite him, head tilted in laughter. Olivia called immediately. The press is sniffing. Do you want me to handle it? Liam stared at the screen, the caption glowing beneath the picture. Unknown woman. He didn't like the phrase. It diminished her. It made her sound disposable. No, he said firmly. I'll handle it. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Liam didn't care what the headline said. He cared only about the woman whose laughter had made the world seem less hollow. Outside, the rain had stopped. A fragile beam of sunlight pierced through the clouds, washing the city in silver. Somewhere in a small classroom on the south side, Lucy read poetry aloud to her students. Her voice warm and steady, wrapped around the words like a promise. "There is a light that never goes out," she read softly, "even in storms." And in his glass tower, Liam stood by the window, eyes fixed on that same stretch of city. He didn't know it yet, but their stories, his search for meaning, her fight for dignity, were already intertwined. For a man who had lost his legacy, something far rarer was beginning to form. Not a lineage of blood, but of choice. Not heirs, but hearts. The photograph hit the internet before noon. Billionaire Liam Caldwell, spotted dining with Southside teacher. By evening, the city was talking. Reporters camped outside his office. Gossip sites speculated about the mystery woman. In a world built on image, silence was its own scandal. Liam stared at the headlines from his penthouse window. It wasn't anger he felt, it was intrusion. The story had reduced something sacred to spectacle. He turned off the screen and closed his eyes, hearing Lucy's laughter from that night at Mama's kitchen. It had been real, fragile, alive. He couldn't bear to see it devoured by the world he came from. Down in the South Side, Lucy learned of the story, not from the news, but from the whispers of her students' parents. "Miss Martin." "Is it true?" one mother asked, half curious, half condemning. Lucy smiled through the sting. "It's true that I met someone kind, that's all." But she knew what they saw: a woman out of place, daring to reach beyond her station. The storm gathered fast. Board members at Caldwell Enterprises muttered about reputation. Socialites whispered at charity galas. And in the Caldwell family mansion, the air turned cold. Victoria Caldwell arrived at Liam's office unannounced, every inch the empire's guardian. Her tailored suit was immaculate, her voice sharp as crystal. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked, tossing a tabloid onto his desk. A South Side schoolteacher. A pregnant one, apparently. "The board is calling. Our name, father's name, is being dragged through the mud." Liam looked up slowly, his tone quiet but unyielding. "Her name is Lucy Martin. She saved my life." Victoria scoffed. "And now she's saving herself with you." He stood, anger simmering beneath control. "You don't know her." "I don't need to," she replied. "I know this world, Liam. I know how fast they'll turn a savior into a scandal. You've built everything father wanted. Don't throw it away for a woman who doesn't belong." Her words struck deep, not because he believed them, but because once he might have said them himself. When she left, the office felt emptier than ever. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he saw his reflection, a man split in two, one molded by expectation, the other searching for redemption. 2 days later, Victoria drove to Southside. Her driver refused to leave the car running for fear of theft. A small insult that said everything. She entered the community center, her perfume clashing with the scent of crayons and old paper. Lucy was stacking books when she looked up. "Miss Martin?" Victoria asked. Lucy nodded, polite but wary. "Can I help you?" "I'm Victoria Caldwell, Liam's sister." Lucy straightened. "I guessed as much." Victoria set her handbag down, pulled out a checkbook, and placed a slip of paper on the table. $1 million written in elegant blue ink. "Take it," she said, calm as a surgeon. "Start a new life. Build another center. Whatever you want. Just leave my brother out of it." For a moment, Lucy simply stared at the paper. Her hand trembled not from temptation but from insult. Then she lifted her eyes to Victoria's, her voice steady as steel. "You think this buys my silence? My dignity?" Victoria's gaze didn't waver. "It buys peace for everyone. Lucy took the check, tore it cleanly in half, and placed the pieces back on the table. I don't need your money. I need to be respected. For the first time, Victoria hesitated. The certainty in Lucy's voice unsettled her. You'll regret this, she said softly. Maybe Lucy replied, but at least it'll be my regret. When Victoria left, Lucy's hands shook, but not from fear. In her chest bloomed a quiet fire dignity, bruised but unbroken. That night Liam showed up at the center, his coat still wet from rain. Lucy was closing up when he appeared at the door. She came here, didn't she? He asked. Lucy nodded. Your sister is efficient. He ran a hand through his hair, shame flickering across his face. I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. Lucy folded her arms. You can't stop what people like her believe, Liam. To her, I'm a stain on your world. He stepped closer. To me, you're the only part of it that feels honest. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between them, familiar, dangerous. Lucy's expression softened, but only slightly. You can't keep fighting your world for me. He met her gaze. Maybe I'm fighting for myself. Her lips parted, words caught between fear and longing. But before either could speak again, a car outside flashed its headlights. Paparazzi. The vultures had found them. Lucy froze. You need to go, she whispered. I'm not leaving you like this. Please, Liam. Her voice cracked. Every time you show up, my life gets smaller. I lose another piece of what I've built. My job, my peace soon. It'll be everything. The words hit him like glass breaking. Slowly he nodded, rain tracing down his face. I'll go, he said quietly, but I won't stop caring. She turned away before he could see the tears that threatened. Through the window she watched him disappear into the storm, the taillights fading like embers swallowed by rain. Later that night, Lucy sat alone at her desk. The power flickered. The rain hadn't stopped. She reached for a photo of her students pinned to the wall. Smiling faces, small dreams. They were her world, she reminded herself. Not a billionaire's broken promise. But when she closed her eyes, she saw his face anyway. That quiet sincerity. The ache behind his calm. The way he had looked at her, as if she was the only truth he trusted. Don't be foolish, she murmured to herself. You live in different worlds. Still, she couldn't ignore the strange certainty blooming in her heart, that their worlds had already collided, and neither could walk away untouched. At the same time, across the city, Liam stood on his balcony, rain soaking through his shirt. Chicago's skyline stretched before him, a cage of light and glass. He thought of Lucy's defiance, of the torn check, of how she had faced his sister without flinching. Pride mingled with guilt, admiration, with shame. He had built his empire on control numbers, contracts, outcomes. But Lucy Martin had taught him something no deal ever could: that worth wasn't inherited. It was earned. He whispered into the night, a confession carried by the wind. You're braver than anyone I've ever known, Lucy. I just don't know if I deserve you. The rain softened, a faint glimmer of dawn breaking through the clouds. In the faint morning light, Victoria sat alone in her penthouse, staring at the torn check she'd retrieved from Lucy's table. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps she'd met a woman her brother couldn't simply outgrow. Meanwhile, Lucy walked to school, head held high, though eyes rimmed red, when one of her students handed her a daisy. For you, Miss Martin. She smiled, fragile but real. And far above, in his glass tower, Liam dialed a number he'd memorized. When the call went to voicemail, he said only, Lucy, I don't know how to leave you without losing myself. He hung up before she could answer. Outside, the rain began again, not violent this time, but steady, as if washing the world clean for what would come next. The headlines spread faster than truth ever could. Billionaire's love scandal. The teacher. The twins. The lie. Caldwell empire. Tarnished by Southside affair. Who is Lucy Martin? Really? Every word cut deeper than the last. Within days, reporters crowded outside Lucy's small apartment, their flashes turning night into lightning. Strangers whispered in grocery lines. Parents began withdrawing their children from her program. The board at Southside High placed her on temporary leave. No one asked for her side of the story. No one wanted it. Lucy sat alone in the empty community center, the air thick with silence. On the table before her lay a stack of letters from parents, some polite rejections, some venom, disguised as concern. Her hands trembled as she unfolded one. "We appreciate all you've done, Miss Martin. But until the situation with Mr. Caldwell is resolved, it's best for our children to distance themselves." Distance. It was such a clean word for cruelty. She pressed her palms to her face, breathing hard. "You said you wouldn't let them break you," she whispered to herself. But even her voice sounded tired now. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the windows, like a memory she couldn't shut out. Across the city, Liam stood in a conference room filled with glass and judgment. His board demanded answers, his sister refused to speak to him, and reporters hounded his every move. "Step back from her," Liam, one of the investors, warned. "You're risking everything, your credibility, the company, your family's name." Liam's gaze stayed on the skyline. He'd built it once with ambition. Now he wondered if love could rebuild it differently with truth. He turned voice low but clear. "You want my statement? Here it is. Lucy Martin saved my life. The rest is noise." He left the room before anyone could reply. That evening, he went to her. The crowd outside her building was relentless flashes, questions, chaos. He pushed through, ignoring the shouted insults. "Gold digger charity project, Liam. Look this way." When she opened the door, her face was pale, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Liam," she breathed. "You shouldn't be here. I couldn't stay away. You'll only make it worse." "I don't care," he said quietly. "I won't let them crucify you for being human." Her lip quivered, torn between anger and heartbreak. "You think love fixes this? It doesn't, Liam. Love doesn't pay rent. It doesn't silence lies." He stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "No. But it can stand beside you while you face them." She looked at him for a long moment, at the man she'd dragged from fire, now standing like he'd burn again for her. Something inside her broke and healed at once. She nodded. "Then stand with me. All the way." 2 mornings later, the world watched. A wall of cameras lined the steps of Caldwell Tower. Reporters pressed forward as Liam took the podium, flanked by security. He had no notes, no PR team, just truth. "Before we begin," he said, voice steady over the hum of the storm, "you should know I wasn't supposed to survive the night of that crash. I owe my life to one person, Lucy Martin." The crowd hushed. Flashbulbs froze his expression in light and shadow. "She didn't ask who I was. She didn't hesitate. She pulled me out of a burning car. She's a teacher, a daughter, a soon-to-be mother. And she deserves your respect, not your judgment." His voice cracked slightly, not from weakness but conviction. "Caldwell Enterprises stands on legacy. But today, I'm standing on something stronger: gratitude. And love. If that costs me everything I own, so be it." The words fell like thunder. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He was confessing. When he turned, Lucy was there, hesitant at first, then steady. She stepped up beside him, the crowd gasping. Her hands shook, but her chin lifted high. Standing together, they faced the storm. In that moment, the noise faded. The cameras, the chaos, the whispers. It was only them. Liam reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Later, after the reporters had dispersed and night cloaked the city, they sat in the empty conference hall. The air smelled faintly of rain and metal. Lucy leaned back in her chair, exhaustion written across her face. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. He smiled a tired, crooked smile. "I did. I've spent my whole life protecting a name. It's time I protected something real." Her eyes softened. "You just made yourself a target." "I've been one all my life," he murmured. "At least now I know why." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "You shouldn't have to fight for me, Liam." He met her gaze, unflinching. "Maybe I'm fighting for both of us." For a long while they sat in silence, the world outside still uncertain, but quieter now. Somewhere beyond the city's hum, a fragile peace began to take root. But peace is never permanent. The next day, new headlines emerged, sharper, colder. Anonymous sources allege teacher used relationship for financial gain. Community center, under investigation for fund misuse. Lucy read the articles in disbelief. They'd twisted her work, her reputation, everything she'd built. She tried calling Liam, but reporters swarmed his office again. By evening, she was alone. The phone silent. Her reflection fractured in the window pane. Her voice cracked in the stillness. "How much more do I have to lose?" Across town, Liam read the same headlines and felt something in him break. Rage and guilt collided inside him. He had wanted to shield her, but his protection had painted a larger target on her back. He slammed his fist against the desk, the glass shattering. "Who's behind this?" he demanded. Olivia hesitated. "It looks orchestrated. Someone's paying people to feed lies." Liam's expression darkened. "Victoria." He didn't want to believe it, but the pattern was too precise. The timing, the reach. Only someone from within his world could weaponize it so cleanly. That night he went to see his sister. Victoria stood by the fireplace, composed as ever. "Liam," she greeted coolly. "You look tired." He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're behind this smear, aren't you?" Her brows lifted slightly. "I did what had to be done." "You destroyed an innocent woman." "I preserved our family," she countered. "You can thank me later." He took a step closer, his voice raw. "If you ever loved me, if Father ever meant anything, stop this." Her expression flickered, then hardened. "You think this is love?" "Love doesn't make you a fool, Liam." He shook his head. "No, Victoria. It's the only thing that ever made me human." He left without another word, the echo of his footsteps, the only answer she gave. At dawn, Liam found himself back outside Lucy's building. No cameras this time, just quiet, heavy rain. He saw the light under her door, hesitated, then knocked. She opened it, eyes red but dry. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "Neither should the lies," he replied. "I'll make this right, Lucy. I swear it." Her voice trembled. "I don't want promises. I want peace." He stepped closer, searching her face. "Then let me give you that." For a long moment, she looked at him, truly looked, and in his eyes saw not a savior, but a man trying, failing, and trying again. She nodded once quietly. "Then start by standing beside me tomorrow. They're closing the center for investigation." His jaw tightened. "Then we stand together." Outside, the rain had stopped. The first light of morning touched the soaked streets, fragile and uncertain, like forgiveness, learning how to breathe. They didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would test them more than any headline could, because not all storms come from the sky. Some come from within. The morning began like any other gray sky. Soft drizzle, the muted hum of the city, waking beneath the weight of headlines that had long outlived their meaning. Liam sat at the head of the Caldwell boardroom table, words droning around him like static. He wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, on Lucy, on the quiet strength in her eyes, the night before, on the way she'd said she just wanted peace. Then the phone on the table buzzed. He saw Olivia's name, but it was the tone of her voice that froze him. "It's Lucy. She's in labor. It's too early. Liam, 8 months. The room fell away. Chairs scraped, voices called after him, but he didn't hear them. He was already running. Rain streaked across the windshield as he tore through the city. Traffic blurred into color and panic. Every red light, every siren in the distance was a heartbeat against his ribs. "Hold on, Lucy. Please hold on." He reached the hospital breathless, half-soaked, barely coherent. The nurse at the desk recognized his name instantly, but this time it meant nothing. Money couldn't buy what he was begging for now. Lucy Martin. He gasped. She was brought in labor complications. "She's in emergency surgery," the nurse said gently. "They're trying to stabilize both babies." Liam's world tilted. He pressed his palms against the counter, feeling the ground shift beneath him. Surgery. Not delivery. Surgery. He pushed through the corridor, ignoring protocol, until a doctor stopped him outside the operating room. "Mr. Caldwell, you can't go in." He could see the shadow of Lucy on the table, her body small against the blinding light's wires running like lifelines. Through the glass, he saw her chest rise and fall, barely. A nurse guided him back to a waiting area, but he couldn't sit. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. He'd spent his life controlling outcomes, calculating risk, mastering loss through numbers. But there was no equation for this. Inside the operating room, Lucy drifted in and out of consciousness. Voices echoed, doctors, nurses, machines. Her body trembled under anesthesia, but somewhere deep within, she clung to one thought: the babies. When the pain spiked, she reached out, finding a hand, warm, trembling. Liam's hand. He'd forced his way past the door. No one dared stop him. Her eyes fluttered open. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered through the mask. "I'm not leaving." Her lips trembled into something that might have been a smile or surrender. "Liam," she breathed, weak but clear. "If I don't make it." He shook his head violently. "Don't say that. Listen to me," she whispered. "If I don't, promise me you'll take care of them. Love them even when the world doesn't." His voice broke. "You'll be here to love them yourself." Her fingers squeezed his weakly, then went still as the anesthetic deepened. The doctor's voice cut through the hum. "We're losing pressure. Prep for emergency C-section." Liam's heart stopped. They pushed him out before he could protest, the doors swinging shut between them. For the next hour, time ceased to exist. He stood outside the glass, staring into that room of blinding light and moving shadows. Every sound, the rhythm of machines, the murmur of doctors felt like a verdict waiting to be delivered. He prayed. For a man who hadn't believed in anything for years, he prayed. Take everything else, just let them live. The doors opened. A doctor stepped out, removing her mask. Her eyes were tired, but kind. "Mr. Caldwell, the babies are alive. 2 girls. His breath left him in a shudder. "And Lucy, she's stable, weak, but she'll recover with rest." For a moment, he couldn't speak. His knees nearly gave out as relief broke through him like sunlight after years of rain. He pressed a hand to his chest, whispering, "Thank you." The doctor nodded and motioned toward the viewing window. They're very small, but fighters. Behind the glass, two tiny lives moved fragile and pink, breathing through impossibly small lungs. Tubes ran from their arms. Monitors blinked with delicate precision. He leaned closer, eyes stinging. "Zoe," he whispered, looking at the one who had clenched her fist as if refusing to let go. And Maya to the one whose chest rose in slow, steady rhythm. They looked nothing like him, yet somehow felt like his reflection. He didn't see frailty. He saw miracles, each breath a rebellion against fate. "Hello, little ones," he said softly, voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." A nurse nearby smiled. "You can touch the glass, Mr. Caldwell. They can't feel it, but somehow they always know." He rested his palm against the cool surface. On the other side, Zoe stirred as if answering him. And in that silent exchange, something inside him shifted irrevocably. For the first time since his father's death, since the sterile diagnosis that had stripped him of pride, Liam Caldwell believed again. Not in legacy, not in bloodlines, but in faith, the kind born of love. Hours later, Lucy woke to the soft hum of machines and the faint light of dawn. Her body ached, but when she turned her head, she saw him. Liam sat beside her, bed hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled faintly. "I told you I don't leave." Her gaze drifted to the window where two incubators glowed under gentle light. "They're alive. They're fighters," he said, and his voice broke. "They're perfect." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I was so scared." "So was I." He took her hand. "But you were right, you trusted life when I couldn't." She turned to him, her expression tender but tired. "You don't have to be their father out of guilt." He shook his head. "Lucy, when I saw them, when I saw you, something inside me changed. I thought I couldn't have children. But now I realize I was the one who needed to be reborn." Silence settled between them, heavy, beautiful, unspoken. He brushed his thumb over her knuckles. "You once told me love doesn't fix everything. Maybe it doesn't, but it gave me a reason to start over." Lucy smiled weakly. "You sound like a teacher. Maybe I had a good one." They both laughed, soft, quiet, fragile, like the first breath after drowning. For 3 nights, Liam slept in the hospital chair, waking at every sound. He watched nurses feed the twins, learn to read the flicker of monitors, memorize the rhythm of their breaths. He visited Lucy between rounds, bringing coffee she couldn't drink and flowers she couldn't smell. It didn't matter. He needed to be there. One evening, as rain fell softly outside, he stood by the nursery window again. His reflection overlapped with the baby's tiny silhouettes. A doctor approached quietly. "They're improving. You should give them names officially." "Are you the father?" Liam hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." Lucy woke later to find a note on her bedside table, written in his familiar steady hand. "Zoe and Maya Caldwell. Born early, but right on time." Below it, he'd added, "Rest. The world can wait." She held the note against her heart, eyes blurring with tears. Outside her room, through the glass wall, she saw him sitting near the nursery suit jacket, off sleeves rolled up, whispering softly to the twins. Something in that image, this powerful man bowed in awe before 2 fragile souls, made her believe again. Not in luck, not even in destiny, but in the quiet resilience of love that refuses to give up. At dawn, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. Liam stood beside Lucy's bed, the two of them watching their daughters sleep. "Zoe means life," Lucy said softly. "And Maya, faith." He smiled. Between life and faith, we'll find our way. Her hand found his. Even if the world doesn't understand. He met her gaze. Then we'll teach it how. Outside, the first golden light touched the glass of the hospital windows, gentle, unwavering, alive. The storm never truly ends. It only changes its shape. Weeks after Zoe and Maya came home, peace felt fragile like a glass reflection ready to crack. Liam thought the worst was behind them, the crash, the media, the fear. But calm, he would learn, is only the pause before the next battle. The first headline hit like a bullet. Billionaire claims paternity of twins, but are they really his? The photo beneath it showed Liam holding one of the babies, face soft, eyes tender. What should have been a symbol of love became proof for those hungry to destroy him. Lucy sat frozen at the breakfast table, the newspaper trembling in her hands. She'd stopped reading about herself months ago, but this time, the words were personal, vicious, cruel. They accused Liam of staging fatherhood for sympathy and accused her of using him for status. She whispered almost to herself, "They'll never let us just live." Liam took the paper, folded it, and set it aside. "Then we'll outlast them." He meant it. But even he didn't see what was coming next. That afternoon, a man appeared outside the gate of the Caldwell residence. Tall, thin, wearing a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus. The name was a ghost Lucy hadn't spoken aloud in months. He had disappeared before the twins were born, leaving only a trail of debt and half-truths. Now he was back with a lawyer, a tabloid, and a camera crew. "I just want to see my daughters," he said for the microphones. "That man stole my family." Lucy stood on the porch, trembling with fury. "You abandoned us, Marcus." He smiled coldly. "You think anyone cares? Money talks louder than truth." Liam stepped between them. His tone was calm, but the air around him changed steel beneath silk. "Then let's talk in court." The courtroom smelled of old wood and new lies. Reporters filled every bench waiting for the scandal to bloom. Lucy sat beside Liam at the defendant's table, her hands clasped in her lap. Across the aisle, Marcus looked smug, whispering to his lawyer. He'd filed for full custody, not out of love, but leverage. If he won, he'd sell his story to the press. If he lost, he'd settle for a price. Liam knew the type. Men who used lives as currency. He had once been one of them. That thought alone burned him deeper than any insult hurled his way. The judge entered, the gavel struck, and the noise of the world shrank into a single heartbeat. Marcus's lawyer rose. First voice, smooth as oil. "Your Honor, my client simply wants to reclaim his rightful children. Mr. Caldwell, though well-intentioned, is not their biological father." The words hung heavy. Cameras clicked. Lucy's pulse raced, but Liam didn't flinch. He leaned toward her, whispering, "Let them talk. Truth has its own voice." When it was their turn, Liam's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence of abandonment, blackmail attempts, and fraud. My client has acted not as a substitute, but as a protector." Lucy turned to look at Liam, her throat tightening. He was calm, composed, but beneath that restraint, she could feel the anger coiled like a storm. Not anger for himself, but for her, for their daughters. When she was called to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She took the stand, heart-hammering hands cold. The opposing lawyer's tone was mocking. "Miss Martin, would you say Mr. Caldwell is a benefactor? A savior?" She met his gaze steady. "No, he's a father." Laughter rippled from the press gallery. The lawyer smirked. "A father who isn't biologically related to your children." Lucy's voice didn't waver. "Blood doesn't raise a child." Love does. The room went quiet again. Even the judge paused before speaking. During recess, they sat together in a small hallway outside the courtroom. The twins' cries echoed faintly from the waiting room down the hall. Liam stared at the floor, jaw tight. If he wins Lucy, I'll fight him until there's nothing left to fight with. She reached for his hand. Don't fight for me. Fight for them. He looked up. You really think I can separate the two? Her eyes softened. I think you already have. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled through the city, a summer storm building over Chicago. The next day, Marcus's web began to unravel. Liam's legal team produced documents, bank statements, recordings, signed admissions. Marcus had attempted to extort multiple families before using false paternity claims for money. The judge's tone sharpened. Mr. Lewis, your client appears to have fabricated most of his testimony. Lucy sat rigid, one hand pressed to her heart. Marcus's smirk faltered. And when his lawyer finally withdrew from the case, Marcus exploded, shouting across the room. She's lying. He paid her to say that. You think I'd walk away from my own kids? Liam stood slowly, calm as still water. You already did. Security escorted Marcus out, his curses fading into the hum of camera flashes. When the verdict came, it was swift and merciful. Marcus Lewis was found guilty of fraud and blackmail. His parental rights were revoked. Liam was granted permanent guardianship of Zoe and Maya. But the victory didn't bring celebration, only quiet. Lucy sat beside him, tears glistening but unshed. She whispered, It's over. He shook his head gently. No, it's just beginning. That evening they drove home under skies washed clean by rain. The city glowed, wet asphalt streetlights trembling in puddles. Lucy sat in the back seat, Zoe asleep against her chest, Maya in Liam's arms. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man reborn through chaos and grace. At a stoplight, he turned toward her. They're ours now. Not by law, by love. She smiled through exhaustion. You always have to make it sound poetic. He chuckled softly. You make me believe poetry exists. She looked down at the twins, tiny hands curled like question marks. They'll need both of us, she said quietly, through everything. His voice lowered. They'll have us, always. The light turned green and the car rolled forward into the soft shimmer of night. But somewhere in that calm, another silence waited, a different kind of storm. Because victories like wounds leave scars. The court's decision made Liam a father in name, but it also drew new lines in his world. Investors pulled back. Board members whispered. His sister stopped returning calls entirely. And Lucy began to wonder how long could love survive in a world that kept testing its worth. Late one night she found him on the balcony, city lights stretching like constellations below. He held one of the twins, gently swaying, his voice barely audible. She has your eyes, Lucy said softly, stepping closer. He smiled. And your courage. For a moment, they stood in silence, the storm behind them, but not forgotten. Lucy leaned her head against his shoulder. We made it through this one. He nodded, eyes on the skyline. Yes. But something tells me the world isn't done with us yet. Below them, thunder rumbled again. Distant, restrained, a reminder that peace is never permanent. And in the nursery behind them, Zoe stirred in her sleep, a faint sound escaping her lips, something between a sigh and a promise. A year later, the Southside Center bloomed again. What had once been a modest community project, paint-peeling windows cracked, was now alive with color and sound. Laughter rang through the courtyard, echoing between brick walls hung with paper lanterns. It was Zoe and Maya's first birthday. Tables overflowed with cupcakes and flowers, the scent of vanilla, mixing with the summer air. Children ran barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles that shimmered like small dreams. Lucy stood among them, radiant in a pale yellow dress, her curls kissed by sunlight. She watched her daughters with a quiet pride, the kind that came not from perfection, but from survival. Liam stood nearby, holding a tray of lemonade, sleeves rolled, hair tousled by the wind. The billionaire had learned how to laugh again, how to live slower. There were no cameras today, no board meetings, no headlines. Only a man who had learned to build something softer than an empire. When their eyes met across the courtyard, Lucy smiled, warm, certain, real. She no longer saw the man she had rescued from fire. She saw the one who stayed to rebuild beside her. Later that afternoon, when the sun tilted low and the music quieted, Liam took a deep breath and called her name. Lucy. She turned, surprised by the tremor in his voice. He was holding something small, a silver ring, simple and unadorned. "I'm not very good at speeches," he began, "but I used to think legacy was measured in numbers, buildings, stock fortune, things that outlast people." He paused, the wind stirring around them. "But then I met you, and I realized legacies aren't made of what we leave behind, but who we love while we're here." He opened the box. The ring caught the fading sunlight, soft and honest. "You and the girls, you're my legacy, Lucy. If you'll have me, I want to spend whatever time I have left proving that love is worth more than any name." Her eyes filled before she could speak. Around them, children's laughter floated like music. The twins clapped, oblivious to history being rewritten in that small, golden moment. Lucy pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "Liam, you don't need to prove anything. You already have." He smiled, eyes bright with quiet joy. "Then say yes." And she did, through tears, through laughter, through the weight of everything they had endured. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and applause rose from the crowd, their neighbors, their students, their friends. It wasn't grand or rehearsed, but it was real. In that moment, amid the cheers and the late afternoon light, love felt less like a victory and more like a truth finally spoken aloud. Later, as twilight softened the sky, a black car pulled up at the edge of the courtyard. The door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out, Victoria Caldwell. Conversations faltered. Even the children sensed the shift in air. Lucy's posture straightened, but she didn't move. The past year had taught her that not every battle needed a sword, some required stillness. Victoria approached slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. She looked different, less armor, more humanity. Her gaze fell first on the twins toddling near a picnic table, their tiny hands covered in frosting. "May I?" she asked quietly. Lucy hesitated, then nodded. Victoria crouched down, unsure, and the twins, unburdened by history, reached for her necklace. One giggled, the other smiled. Something in Victoria's face cracked, a grief long buried rising to the surface. "They remind me of us," she said softly, looking up at Liam. "Before we forgot how to be children." He said nothing, only watched her as she gently lifted Zoe into her arms. Then Victoria turned to Lucy. Her voice trembled, stripped of pride. "I came to say I was wrong. About you. About him. About what really matters." Lucy's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. Victoria's gaze lingered on the babies. "They made me remember something I thought I'd lost, that love. Love is also a legacy. The only kind that doesn't vanish when the money does." For a moment, time stood still. The courtyard glowed under the strings of warm light. And between the two women, once divided by class, fear, and judgment, something like understanding finally bridged the gap. Lucy nodded. Then help us protect it. Victoria smiled faintly, brushing a tear away. I will. The celebration stretched into evening. Music swelled again. The community gathered for cake and dancing. Children played beneath banners painted with bright letters, Grace House. The name shimmered under the lights after Lucy's mother, Grace, the woman who had taught her that kindness was strength. The community had rebuilt the center together, every nail and brushstroke offered with gratitude. Once a symbol of division, it had become a home for hope. Liam stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Lucy speak to the families, her voice calm, warm, commanding. He realized she didn't just belong to this place. She was this place, its heart, its pulse, its unshakable center. He joined her as she finished a speech, her hand brushing his in silent thanks. You did this, he said softly. She smiled. No, we did. You just gave it walls. They filled it with life. He looked around, the laughter, the light, the faces once skeptical, now smiling with pride. It's strange, he murmured. I used to build towers that touched the clouds. Now this small courtyard feels taller. Lucy looked at him, eyes shining. Because for the first time you're standing on love, not ambition. He smiled. Then I hope I never climb down. As night deepened, he carried Zoe on his shoulder, Lucy holding Maya close. Victoria stood nearby, surrounded by children handing her flowers she didn't quite know how to hold. Happy birthday, angels, Lucy whispered, kissing their foreheads. Liam turned to her. Do you think they'll ever understand what it took to get here? She looked at him, at the lights, at the faces of a community once fractured, but now whole. Maybe not. But maybe they don't have to. We built this, so they'll never have to fight the way we did. He kissed her temple. That's the best kind of victory. Later, when the guests had gone and the courtyard was quiet, they sat together on the steps of Grace House. Fireflies drifted through the air, and the city murmured softly in the distance. Lucy leaned against his shoulder. It feels peaceful, she said. Like we finally belong somewhere. Liam nodded, tracing circles on her hand. Maybe peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you build, one choice at a time. She smiled faintly. Then let's keep building. He looked out at the stars, his voice almost a whisper. As long as I have you, I will. Behind them, the sign above the door glowed softly in the dark Grace House, a beacon in the heart of the city. But peace, like love, is never finished. It must be protected, nurtured. And as they held each other beneath the quiet hum of night, neither knew that a new storm, gentler but deeper, was already waiting on the horizon. Spring returned to Chicago with a softness that seemed to hum through the air. The city had changed over the years, yet in the courtyard of Grace House, the same warmth lingered, the sound of children laughing, the smell of chalk dust and blossoms, the pulse of something sacred that had survived every storm. On that bright April morning, banners rippled in the breeze. The Grace Martin Scholarship, celebrating education, equality, and hope. Lucy stood at the center of the stage, sunlight catching in her curls like threads of gold. On either side of her were Zoe and Maya, no longer toddlers, but young girls with the same fierce kindness that had once defined their mother. Liam stood a step behind, one hand resting gently on Lucy's shoulder, the other clutching a small card he'd read 100 times, but would never deliver aloud. It was her day. The audience filled the renovated community hall, students, teachers, benefactors, neighbors, and friends. Among them sat Victoria Caldwell, dignified, yet changed. Time had softened the edges of her voice, but not her conviction. She had funded much of this project quietly, without wanting recognition. The woman who once tried to buy Lucy away had now become one of her strongest allies. When Lucy approached the podium, the room fell into a hush. Her voice, steady yet tender, carried the weight of years of love fought for, of peace, earned inch by inch. My mother once told me she began that family isn't made of blood, but of those who choose to stay, who walk beside us through storms, and stay when the sun comes again. Her gaze swept across the audience, pausing on Liam, who met her eyes with quiet pride. For years, I thought survival was enough. She continued. But love taught me that surviving isn't the same as living. Living means building something that outlasts us, not in our name, but in the lives we touch. Her voice broke slightly as she turned toward Zoe and Maya. This scholarship carries my mother's name, Grace Martin, because she taught me that compassion is not weakness. It's the foundation of strength. And this is her legacy. The room was silent, the kind of silence that listens. Then, as if on cue, the crowd rose in applause, warm, thunderous, unstoppable. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. In all his years of power, he had never heard anything as pure as this, people clapping, not for profit or prestige, but for goodness itself. After the ceremony, sunlight slanted through tall windows, gilding the air with soft dust. Reporters mingled with teachers, children hugged their parents, and Zoe and Maya ran laughing between tables of flowers. They were chasing butterflies, bright yellow ones, that had wandered in through the open garden doors. Lucy stood quietly near the stage, gazing out at the courtyard. She felt something deep, a peace that had no name. Liam approached his steps unhurried. He had aged, but gracefully. His hair was threaded with silver, his eyes the same shade of storm blue that once reflected nothing but emptiness. Now they held light. He stopped beside her, watching their daughters. "They've grown fast," he said softly. Lucy smiled. "Too fast. Every day they remind me that love is a kind of faith, something you keep choosing, even when the world gives you reasons to doubt." He looked at her then, a quiet awe in his gaze. "Lucy," he murmured, "you didn't just save me that night. You saved my soul." She turned toward him, her expression tender, steady. "No, Liam, you just learned how to listen to it again." They stood in silence as laughter rippled from the garden. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden sheen over everything: the children, the flowers, the faces of those who had once been strangers, but were now bound by something far greater than circumstance. Later that afternoon, Victoria approached them holding a small bouquet of white tulips. "I brought these for your mother," she said to Lucy. "She would have been proud." Lucy smiled softly. "She'd have made you dance with the children first." Victoria laughed, a sound neither of them expected. "Perhaps she would have. I'd forgotten what this kind of joy feels like." Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, she reached out and hugged Lucy. "I once thought protecting my family meant keeping people out," she said. "But these two little girls—" She looked at Zoe and Maya, who were busy collecting petals in their pockets. "They reminded me that love isn't a wall. It's a door." Lucy's voice was gentle. "And you walked through it." Victoria nodded, eyes misty. "With help." As evening descended, the courtyard transformed under strings of golden lights. Tables of food lined the garden, children danced barefoot in the grass, and the sound of a violin carried through the soft air. Zoe tugged at Liam's sleeve. "Daddy, dance with Mommy." He laughed. "You think she'll say yes?" Maya, hands on her hips, grinned. She already did. Lucy rolled her eyes, pretending to protest. But when Liam extended his hand, she took it. They danced slowly under the fading lights, surrounded by laughter and the low hum of conversation. "I can't dance," he whispered. "You always say that," she teased. "And yet, you keep letting me try." She smiled, leaning closer. "Because it's not about the steps, Liam. It's about showing up." He looked at her then deeply, as though seeing her for the first time all over again. You've always been the light I was too blind to find. And you, she said softly, are the man who learned to keep it burning. At the far end of the courtyard, a new plaque had been placed beneath a small tree. It read, Grace House Gardens, founded in memory of Grace Martin, and for every child who dares to dream. Lucy knelt before it, with Zoe and Maya, letting their small fingers trace the engraved letters. She was brave, Zoe said. She still is, Lucy replied, glancing up at the stars just beginning to appear. Behind her, Liam stood watching the gentle light of dusk, softening every scar that life had left behind. He realized then that the empire he had once built in glass and steel would fade one day. But this garden of laughter and second chances would not. This was the empire that mattered. As the night deepened, lanterns flickered, and laughter gave way to quiet conversation. Lucy leaned against Liam, both of them watching their daughters chase fireflies through the field. She did it, Liam said softly, almost to himself. Who your mother? She built this through you, through all of us. Lucy's eyes glistened. Then let's keep building. He nodded, brushing his lips against her hair. Always. Above them the lights swayed gently in the spring breeze, like stars caught in motion. And beneath their glow, two little girls ran through the flowers, their laughter rising like music, a song of forgiveness, of faith, of light that never dies. Love doesn't arrive to make life perfect. It comes to make us whole again. The greatest legacy we leave behind is not wealth or titles, but the trust we plant in the hearts of others, the light that keeps shining long after we're gone.